just writing tests in isolation and sort of running them ad hoc, a week or sometimes a couple days before or after a code freeze and before a push. So that was working better, obviously, than the IDE, but we still needed some more structure to our testing. So after a couple more contractors came on board, we devised this tcparams.py. I'm not going to go through and click on all of these files because that would take some time, but tcparams.py is basically it's not as huge as these other files, but it's a pretty big file. Obviously, it's a Python file. All of our code is now in Python. It used to be in, some of it was in PHP, some of it was in native Selenium. It's all these sort options and the application parameters, and this is strictly for, I think, the addons.mozilla.org project. What's really huge is amofunctions.py, which I guess I have to control-click to get that going, or shift.
It's really big.
Yeah, anyway, you can see the number of lines, and you can also, I'll post these slides up on slideshare.net as well. So this essentially has all of the functions that you can do on the add-ons website for every application: Seabird, SeaMonkey, Thunderbird, Firefox, and all the other applications as well. So really, really big, encompasses everything. You had to import it into every test case. It's really a bear. Locators, we started off with XPath, and of course we ran into issues with IE7, IE8 specifically, taking like literally sometimes 6 to 10 times longer to run tests, so we switched most of that to CSS locators. So it's a mix, it's a really ugly mix of XPath and CSS. And again, it's all one file, it's a very static file, and you had to look to find what you needed. Very painful. This has nothing to do with what I just talked about, but here's our current architecture. So I guess I'll lose the microphone if I step too far away from here. But we have 4 Mac Minis. We have both a, let me see if I can, I guess I can't control ++ this. We have a Hudson master, a Hudson slave, a Selenium grid over there on one of the dedicated boxes, and we have a bunch of VMs as well. And then we have all of our host environments, QA, Selenium, and then a number, and then all of the individual machines. And they're split up by projects. So we have Sumo, which is our support website, and we have AMO, which is our add-ons website. And that's our current architecture. And we started off with 2 Mac Minis, which served us pretty well until we started running BFTs, FFTs. So those are basic functionality tests, full functionality tests, and also smoke tests. And we run smoke tests both on the trunk staging servers and on production immediately after a push, so that we know that the push went well. So that's why we had to build our architecture a little bit. The best thing that happened to us apart from Selenium was Hudson. This was literally the magic bullet that my previous boss was excited about. It gave him the kind of reporting that we needed. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Hudson. Okay, most of you are. So for the few of you that aren't, you basically get a build status on the left. It'll tell you if it's green, obviously all of your tests have passed. If it's red, your tests have failed. If it's gray, it's kind of an indeterminate state. I think maybe there's some timeouts there. It's depending also on how you write your tests. We import and extend unit tests, so we do setup and teardowns. And so depending on how you throw your errors into the array, the test reportings will differ. But you can do a lot of stuff. You can set up build schedules. You can set up reporting mechanisms via email, status pages, and the best thing is IRC. So Mozilla lives and dies by IRC. So in our Moz Web QA channel, if a build fails, it immediately pings us all and tells us that a build fails. And we also get emails as well for archival purposes. And it's all indexed on a nice histogram, and it's based on per project. And then on the right there, you can see the little icon over last duration is a build now button, which you can just basically click on and it'll fire off a build. So it's really, really helpful. It's just a Java jar file that you unpack and really easy to set up. And the thing to note is that the way it integrates with Selenium is that it's pretty framework agnostic. There are tons of plugins for it, and we basically just use it to schedule jobs that the grid goes off and fires. Which brings me to our next point. I had an awesome intern this summer who is now contracting with us, and as part of that, he helped clean up our test.py file, which is basically a really big list of smoke tests, BFTs, FFTs, etc. The best thing is that we're now able to tag test, and I'll show you kind of how this ties into the way we run tests later. But all of our tests for one project are in one location, and it's really, really useful. And I'm sorry, on my monitor at home and at work, the smoke test, this is smoke test, but the color didn't show through. I tried to calibrate the display, but it didn't really work. So some of the colors might not be presentation friendly, but. And you can see at the bottom is TC params. Again, TC params are the things you can pass to our test suites to say on the add-ons website how many times you want to run a certain category test, which application you're running the test against, any kind of sort criteria, number of results per page, anything that's parameterized, basically, test case params. So it's pretty useful. This is the best thing right here that the intern did. So he has a suite.py, very, very magical. It uses Python's unit test module and also imports Python's multiprocessing module. So on our grid, we used to just try to fire off a bunch of tests, and depending on whether the grids were available or not, builds would actually fail or things would just not run. So now he actually has a scheduler, and again, because of the lack of color-safe coloring here, this is at pasty.org, by the way. Because of the syntax highlighting here, you can't really see it, but it's multi-process, and once you kick off a build, this suite.py driver actually determines which of the grids are available to run. And I don't know all of the metrics that it uses, but I can tell you that if you fire off a build and it's not ready, it'll queue it up very, very nicely, and when it's ready to run, it'll run it immediately. And the best thing also is that it'll run everything simultaneously in parallel. So your longest pull is going to be the slowest running test, which that's /nuclears.ie. It's usually IE, right? It's usually the slowest test, depending on what you're running. So these are command line parameters, if you want to do so. Normally, when you run through Hudson, you don't need command line parameters. This is if you have your grid connection set up to do local, or if you just want to fire off a local instance. But here's the arguments you can give it. You Python suite.py FFT functional test. And you can also do a logical AND operation. So you want to say basic functional test, but only the collections. You don't want to run the search test. You don't want to run the layout tests or the API tests or whatnot. So that's pretty handy. And this allows you, like, say a developer checks in a change and wants to know pretty quickly whether or not they've regressed the API or the search functionality. You can just fire off a test ad hoc, and you'll get results returned in however long it takes to run the test. So, which brings me to the next point. We've had a lot of problems with our staging servers. IT likes to do things like install mod.wsgi on top of mod.python, which basically kills your server and makes it return 500 errors all day long. And you complain about it, and they'll get to it when they want to get to it. So what we built into our driver into suite.py right here, we've imported urllib from Python, and we check the response code. If the response code is anything but a 200 OK, we basically drop down and return a failure, but it's a special kind of failure, and I'm pretty sure our test will pass because of that, but the threshold of the test, so the time in which they run, if it's like, say, 20 seconds or less, we know that that test actually didn't run. It's just this type of failure. We still probably need to find a better way to flag that, but it's been very useful for us. So we don't get a lot of spurious failures because the server's down. And even though the comment here says, and you can't read it, it says hash print ammo server is down, this is actually, since it's in the driver, it's application and project agnostic. The other thing is that we use search engines, namely Sphinx, although we're going to look at using Lucene. And the way our Sphinx node cluster is set up, we tend to get, depending on the project, and I don't know why the implementation is different, we tend to get 500 errors returned from Sphinx internally, where the application itself, the PHP, usually a Django app, is returning 200 OK and is actually working. So in that case, we want to say, okay, we don't need to run the search test at this time, we just want to run the application tests. So that logic in the sumo page.py allows us to do that. And if you notice sumo_page.py, this is part of the page object model, so this is newer stuff that we've been working with.